So what's the next thing? Next thing is Greeks. For any option, how the price is determined at any given point of time, right? It's determined by a formula called. So they are determined by this particular formula, and this particular formula has four Greeks, which are constants. So in any formula, you have. I'm not sure how many math folks or anyone with some basic familiarity with this particular formula is equal to mx plus c. That's a formula of a line, right?
Right.
So in this particular case, y-axis, wherever your point is on the y-axis, will be determined by this particular what the value of the x is, and based on these particular constants. So m and c are the constants. M is the slope, and c is the extra additional constant. So any formula essentially has constants and variables, right? So in this case, these are our constants, and based on these, the value of all the option prices are determined. So these four constants are first is delta, second is vega, third is theta, and fourth is gamma. Now delta. So essentially, what we do is we have and when we put into the formula, we get the prices of the options. It's not as straightforward, but let's just go with it for now. Now let me go into what these particular Greeks are. So delta. So I did tell you, right? What are derivatives? Derivatives derive their value. A contract which derives its value from the change in another instrument that it's based on, which is also called underlying. A contract derives its value from underlying. So if a Nifty 15,000 CE Feb, this particular thing will derive its value from wherever, right? So for delta essentially means that how much a price of option will change with change in price of underlying, right? So if Nifty, it essentially means if Nifty moves 1 point, how much will the corresponding option price will move? And this will vary for strike to strike. So 15,000 CE will have different delta value. We can actually go and take a look at the options chain for this. Nifty 15,000 CE. So 15,000 CE is 0.43. So for 1 point change in Nifty, this particular contract will move 0.43 points. And similarly, as you go far out, the values of these will change. As you go more and more inside, like 14,500 call option, it will move for 1 point change in Nifty. This particular thing will change 0.84 points, and so on and so forth. So delta tells you that if Nifty moves 1 point, how much will the price of the corresponding option will move. So this is Nifty. This is delta, sorry. Now let's come to Vega. This is the second Greek. It essentially tells it's a measure of volatility. So it's I'm simplifying it in very basic terms. So it's essentially the amount of move the market is expecting. Okay, so if small correction, wait a minute. Moneymaker wrote something. Small correction. Black-Scholes formula is used by people who are writing the NFO options. It's a it's a formula to properly evaluate option values so that the option seller has a higher probability of making a profit. NSE doesn't look or determine the starting price. Yeah. So Moneymaker, we'll come to that part. What I'm just saying right now is that NSE obviously doesn't determine this. We as sellers determine this price. All I'm essentially saying is that it has these particular four Greeks based on which it derives its final price. That's all. So Vega is a measure of volatility. It's essentially the amount of move market is expecting. So it's essentially Vega tells you that how much move the market is expecting on the on the particular underlying. If market is expecting, let's say budget is nearby, right? So market is expecting a huge move in Nifty. So implied volatility, Vega value will be very high. So it essentially means that market is expecting a very higher move, and based on that, the prices of options would be higher. That's one way to look at it. So we'll come back to this later. It's not very important, right?
Yeah.
Then we'll
Do you want me to how to define this Vega?
Yeah, dude, go for it, man. Thanks.
Yeah. So Vega is usually the I would say the factor by which the option value would move with the movement in the underlying asset. For example, if SBI is moving 1%, how much will the option value move? That is the Vega value.
But that's delta.
That's also Vega, right?
No, Vega is essentially how much volatility
That's
the
the
market is expecting
yeah.
at
That's
the
the option
time.
sensitivity to implied volatility, right?
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So theta, this is the third thing, and this is the time value. And if you ever been to YOLO trade, this is a bitch about all the time that the options are losing value to theta. Theta is killing their options and stuff like that. So it's the time value. It's the amount of it's the value the contract will lose for no change in underlying over a time period. So if I this is one of those values, what it essentially says is that any contract will have a time value, right? So for Nifty, you have weeklies and you have monthlies. So you have Nifty 15,000 CE, which is for 4th Feb, 11th Feb expiry, and you have Nifty and you have Nifty 15,000 CE, which is for 20. Wait a minute. Last Thursday is 25th Feb. So you have one for 25 Feb. Okay. Now these are essentially the contract which basically say the same thing, right? An obligation on one lot of Nifty to buy one lot of Nifty at 15,000 CE. But what's the difference between them? The difference is the time. So this particular thing is closer. It is how much is the expiry on this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this has 5 days to expiry. And this particular thing has some 20 days to expiry. So in this case, this particular thing, the one which is closer, 5 days to expiry, this will have a lot lesser, that is less time value, which is why the options would be cheaper. And since this particular it's essentially the same contract, just further out in time, it will still have a significantly higher value. So higher theta value options would be expensive. Okay, now let's look at the options chain for the same thing. So this is 15,000 CE for 11th Feb, right? The current price is 143 rupees per unit. So if I actually convert that to a single lot, oh sorry, that's it's 117.8. So 117.8 into 75. That's the price of one lot of Nifty 15,000 CE, which is expiring on 11th Feb. Okay, so let's just write this down. And for Nifty 15,000 C, which is expiring in 25th Feb, this would be more expensive since this has more time value. So this particular thing is 252 per unit, which when multiplied by 75 is 18,900. So it's essentially the exact same, but the difference is the time. So this particular thing is 18,900 per lot, and it's the exact same contract but for different time. And just because of the time, there's a value of 10,000 rupees in both of these. So this is theta. This is one of the more important ones. And since we know that time actually moves in one direction, time is always moving forward. The value of time, you always want to be selling these options in most cases, because if you're selling options, time is in your favor. It's not working against you. And last is the gamma. Gamma essentially says how much delta will change for 1 point move in underlying. So what was delta? Delta basically says that if Nifty moves 1 point, how much will the price of the option will move, right? So if in this case our 50,000 option is 0.48, right? So if Nifty moves 1 point, if Nifty moves 1 point, 15,000 CE will move 0.48 points, since it has 0.48 delta. Now, now Nifty is at 15,001. Actually, no, Nifty is wherever it is. But from next point on, this particular value of delta will also change. If Nifty has moved 1 point, then delta will also change. Delta, as Nifty moves closer to the particular option prices, the value of delta goes up, right? So what determines this change in the value of delta itself? It's the gamma. So gamma essentially says that how it defines how much delta will change for 1 point change in underlying. I mean, I don't know how to further simplify this, but I think as we'll go into the more option strategies, this might start to make sense. So Greeks are a bitch. I mean, and I actually did share a video 2 days ago, and you guys probably might want to go through that afterwards. That will just double confirm whatever you guys want to learn. Yeah, gamma is basically acceleration. So if delta is velocity, like what's the speed of change, right? No, what's the speed of change? So gamma would be how quickly the speed itself is changing. You can think of it in this way. So these are the Greeks. Greeks are one of the more difficult concepts to grasp, and as a beginner, some of you might not know what to make out of it. But as as it will just as you'll go along, things will start to get back into place. You should just have a vague idea of what these things mean. It's not important to know everything, right?